Well, cheers, how you do, buckaroos, and how the heck are you? So, I'm a Manhattan drinker. Those of you that know me know that. I've occasionally had an old fashioned, but I made a statement to someone the other day, and I might have been a little unfair. I made a statement that an old fashioned is just too sweet for me. And that was really based on the last few that I had out, which is why I quit ordering them years ago, because they always came too sweet. So, out of curiosity, I decided to look up several recipes and just to see what the differences are. And there is quite a bit of difference depending on who you're listening to. Um, I'm not going to mention the bourbon this website's from because I'm using a different bourbon or a different whiskey. Actually, I'm not using bourbon. I'm using the Roland Standard Midwestern 4-grain whiskey. However, they call for 1.5 parts of the whiskey, 3 dashes of bitters, pinch of raw sugar, and cherry to garnish. Now, I've seen others that call for simple syrup. I even saw one that called for agave syrup. There is no way in hell I'm ever going to put agave syrup in good whiskey. However, some might. So in a rocks glass, muddle the sugar and bitters, add ice, then pour bourbon on top, stir gently, garnish with a cherry. So that's what I did. Others will say dark cherry. What I use though is well, I use these with the same cherries I used when I make my Manhattans. Right there, that'd be the proper cherry to use. So I thought, well, made just that. This calls for just a pinch of raw sugar, and I happen to have some raw sugar, so that's what I did. Again, my issue has just been sometimes I've had this drink. I've even been to friends' house where they've made them, and they're just too sweet for my particular taste. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a cocktail. I just don't dig a sweet drink. Even when I make a Manhattan, many will use more sweet vermouth than I personally like. But I thought when I saw this recipe, I thought, hey, this one's perfect because some will call it variations. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Some will call for, I've seen variations of simple syrup from just a little bit to quite a lot, and I just didn't want to do that either. And if I was going to make a simple syrup again, I would use my raw syrup, raw sugar, and make a simple syrup. I love the nose, and a lot of that's this particular whiskey. This 4-grain whiskey is just beyond gorgeous. Throughout history, the American Railroad has stood for growth and perseverance from the stockyards of Kansas City to the railways connecting our nation. Each freight train's journey represented a new beginning. Rolling Standard, a Midwestern 4-grain whiskey, is our expansion to something new, a complex combination of barley, wheat, corn, and rye. Now that's what I wanted to convey to you. That it has barley, wheat, corn, and rye. So obviously it's not saying it's a bourbon. It is 92 proof, and I've been drinking it mostly neat because well it deserves to be neat. But at 92 proof, you could add a little bit of water. I mean I'm not talking 50-50. I'm talking a splash. Just enough to kind of wake up the nose. But I personally drink it mostly neat. But I have used it in a Manhattan, and it makes a nice Manhattan as well. But this is my first attempt at an old fashioned with this. So here we go. Cheers. Now, making it the way I made it, following that recipe, it is mostly whiskey. And I actually I used 2 full ounces of this pour, about a half dozen shakes of Regan's Orange Bitters. It's a Sazerac company. I didn't realize that before. 45% alcohol by volume, so it ain't playing either. Again, they said a pinch of raw sugar. That's what I added, man, just a pinch. So I don't have much sugar in here. However, in getting the cherry out, there's no way you can get it out without just a little bit of that cherry juice. So there's just a little bit of that cherry or syrup. It's more like a syrup in these. So that little bit added just a little bit of color. And whereas a Manhattan is traditionally served straight up, although you can get it on the rocks if you prefer it most places. But if I'm drinking a Manhattan, I'm always drinking her straight up. But an old fashioned is typically drank on the rocks. My issue is that I don't want too much ice. So here again, I've got that 1 large cube in here. That's all I'm going to use. You don't need much ice. I hate when people they fill that glass up with ice. That's why I cringe ordering cocktails out, because I never know what's going to happen. So I typically don't. Typically, if I get whiskey, I drink it straight or rocks, unless I at a place that's known for a particular cocktail. When I was at Tom's Town, I did order a Manhattan there because the guy looked like he knew how to make one, and by golly, I was right. He sure did. Now, drinking this right now, the way I've got it made, I owe that very nice lady an apology. That wasn't mean. I just, we were talking. I prefer Manhattan. She said, "Oh, an old fashioned." She was kind of being snippy with me, so I snipped back. So now they're a little too sweet for me. However, I wanted to I wanted to rethink my opinion on it all. So making this at home, yeah, I could drink this. This is, we're basically, hell, I've got all the ingredients of Manhattan without the sweet vermouth. So, I mean, what the hell? I'm just adding a pinch of sugar. But yes, where the drink typically goes wrong for me is like that one recipe called for agave syrup. I mean, damn, I just ain't gonna do that. That's mean. Simple syrup. I don't have an issue with simple syrups. Again, it just depends on how much you want to put in and how it's made. I have some raw sugar, and there are times I make my own simple syrup. So, yeah, I would use that. But again, if I'm using a good quality whiskey, if all the other ingredients are top quality, why am I putting a cheap sugar in my drink? And again, some bar syrups will contain high fructose corn syrup, so that changes everything. And again, some will put more, some will put less. It just depends. I mean, I've seen recipes call for a quarter ounce. To me, that would be way too sweet. This pinch of sugar is absolutely perfect. It still lets me enjoy the whiskey, but I can't feel that I have bitters in here. I can't feel that there is a touch of sugar, and I know that I've added that cherry. But I've done all that without changing the flavor completely of the whiskey. And for me, that's when a cocktail works. And I do realize that some people want that direct opposite effect. That some want to drown down whatever alcohol they're putting in completely. I mean, I was going to say I understand it, but I really don't. I think people that drink that way are only drinking to get drunk. Now, I'm not saying people like me don't get drunk, because I've certainly been there. But for me, it's about the journey. It's about getting there, and I want to taste whatever alcohol I'm using. Because for me, it's the whole thing. It's making the drink, or if I'm out watching them make the drink, it's seeing it being poured into glass. It's appreciating the aromas, and then just drinking it and enjoying every sip or every drink. So there you go. That's my particular thoughts on the matter. This is I think this is my first old fashioned video, man. Uh, got a glare coming in. I closed half of my curtains, but I didn't close the other half. I probably should have closed the other half. Biscuits, that's good. I like this whiskey, right? Because the 4 grain, barley, wheat, corn, and rye, you certainly can feel all of that in some way. It's not as sweet as a bourbon can be. It's not as spicy as a rye can be. It's not even as spicy as a bourbon can be with rye as a secondary grain. But it's also not as sweet or soft as a wheated bourbon. It just seems to carry a little bit of everything with it, and adding that barley gives it another layer as well. See, it's a whiskey that I seem to taste everything different every time I pour me a little bit. So there you go. So this was pleasant, man. It was good, brother. Anyway, I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer at this particular moment. Prolific whiskey drinker, whiskey evangelist, purveyor of wisdom, and all around good guy. Cheers. Stop.